We need to talk about the Tzeentch Elephant in the room, and that is the range combat in Total War Warhammer 40k, or to be a little bit more precise, how it was in the previous Total War games. Because, let's be real here, one of the bread and butter combat experiences in Warhammer 40k is, of course, range combat. There are tons and tons of range or hybrid units in the game, and we do, of course, expect them in the new Total War game, right? So far, so good. The problem here is, unfortunately, that if you are looking back to the previous Total War games, there are some minor issues here. And that is, of course, that the range combat was not always really that good. And we don't even have to look for some weird ones or some odd ones out. We can just directly go to Total War Warhammer 1, 2, and 3 and have a look at the range combat there. And yes, I do admit that, of course, the range combat in that game functions differently than it will function in Warhammer 40k, because in Total Warhammer, it's pretty simple. You have your row of soldiers in the front, you have your melee fighters, and then afterwards you have your casters, artillery, and of course your range attackers. So far, so simple. And of course, that would not be the case in Warhammer 40k, right? Because we have already seen some really short gameplay scenes where it looks much more chaotic and much more closer. But again, that leads me to the question of how will this work? I hope they did a complete rework. Because when we are looking at Total War Warhammer, you realize that they basically have three categories on how they handle range attacks. So the first category is everything arrows, designated as arrow unit. Then we have the bullet unit, or the straight shooter. And then we have this weird fire thing, or chemical attack, let's call it that. And that's everything which basically has AoE and which doesn't really fit into the previous categories. So what's the difference here? Well, the arrow category is straightforward, right? You shoot the arrow into the air, the arrow comes down, does damage. And they even put some units in there which don't necessarily always make sense. Like, yes, archers, of course, in there, and so certain artillery pieces, but they also do put in crossbowmen. And it's like, wait a minute. So you're telling me you have crossbowmen, and those crossbowmen shoot their arrows into the sky so that they come down and rain on the enemy? That's not really how a crossbow is supposed to be used. Sure, you can do it, better than not doing it all, but it basically makes no difference in the game, right? It doesn't make a difference if you have a straight line on the enemy with those crossbowmen or if they are shooting their stuff in the sky. It's the same damage in the end. And then, of course, we have the bullet range fighters, or straight lines, and they're a pain in the ass. Let's just face it. They are a pain in the ass because you have to maneuver them the whole time, you have to control them most of the time, and you really have to set them up so they can do most of the damage. And the moment something is in the way, a pebble, a little hill, or your own units, even if it's just one unit, the whole regiment stops shooting and becomes completely useless. I get that this is how they are trying to balance this, right? Like, arrow units can basically shoot all the time, even if there is like a huge cluster fluff going on at the front, while, of course, the straight shooters, they can't do that, but they're really, really powerful. If you can set them right up, and if you can set them up in the right position, then you can devastate a whole army. And then, as I said, there's the third category, which is a weird mix between like bullet straight shooters, but they're also shooting even if their friendly units are there. They're a little bit weird. But as I said, a lot of like, it doesn't really matter how it looks. Those are the three categories. Like, let's take the pink horrors of Tzeentch, right? They use magic. They use magic missiles. It's arrows, right? They behave exactly like the arrow shooters. And that's all fine in a game where most of your units will be some sort of melee fighters. I know they are also hybrids, which do exist, and we will probably see them quite a bit also in Warhammer 40k. But in Total War Warhammer, hybrids are, ooh, they are mixed bag. Let's just call it that. They are mixed bag because the balance they tried to achieve was, okay, you can do range fighting, which makes you strong, but then you were also pretty good in melee fighting. So we really have to butcher your numbers because we cannot we cannot let it happen that one unit is excelling at both, right? That would make them pretty much OP. And again, in the confines of Total War Warhammer, that is fine. How warfare is being handled there is fine. It's still not great. It feels clunky. It doesn't feel really great with a lot of units. There's a reason why they had multiple times to rework on how range units actually work in that game. And I'm really just hoping that they are throwing everything out of the window with Warhammer 40k and start from scratch. Because I don't want to have rows of range fighters the whole time. Like, Warhammer 40k is, yes, there are rows and all that, but there's also like a lot of big messes in the front line, and there are a lot of units which will fire in a very close range, right? And they will have to deal with melee fighters. They will have to deal with hybrids. And I just want that to to just, it has to feel good, right? It has to feel like that I don't have to babysit my range fighters the whole time. And my melee fighters are just being thrown into the front lines, completely forgotten about, and then I'm trying to find the best position for those range fighters or artillery pieces. Like, I hate to do that the whole time. And I know what some people now might be thinking, oh Mo, yeah, this is just how it goes. Learn to play. No, no, no. I'm not talking about that I don't need to position myself or anything. That's normal. Look, I have over 1,000 hours in Warhammer 3 alone. Like, I know what positioning is and how important that all is. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking that it feels sometimes so awkward, and a lot of the range units in Warhammer need to be babysitted the whole time. And you are playing more with your range units than you are playing with, well, your whole army. And it feels weird, right? So I'm really hoping that with the new engine in particular, also, they have learned their lesson. And I hope they fixed most of the issues and that range will be good, that it will feel good in particular. Because let's be real, if that feels shitty, if that feels as clunky as it does in Warhammer 3, that's not a good thing for a Warhammer 40k game. So let's hope for the best. By the way, let me know down below in the comments, what is your most atrocious range unit in the Total War series? For me personally, it is the pink horror of Tzeentch, as I mentioned before. That thing actually got multiple reworks because it was absolutely useless or absolutely devastating, right? And they had to rework that particular unit so often. It was just abysmal. And I'm pretty sure the pink horrors will return at some point in Warhammer 40k. And please, get them fixed. Get them in order. But let me know down below in the comments, what's your most atrocious unit? With that said, we're at the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please don't forget to leave a like. And also, if you're new to the channel, you love strategy building and management games, and of course, Total War and Warhammer 40k, well, you came to the right place, and I hope you will subscribe to the channel. With that said, thank you so much for watching. Stay safe